The Maximum Series Spider-Man has been hailed as the perfect representation of the artwork of the legendary Todd McFarlane. But is it really? We're going to go through every aspect of McFarlane's distinct art style and see just how the Maximum figure stacks up. Hey y'all, and welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics, history, and action figures. The new Maximum Spider-Man figure has generated quite a bit of controversy and just as many reviews from some of my favorite YouTube creators. Because of this, we're going to take a different approach in looking at this figure. I went back and pulled every single Spider-Man issue ever drawn by Todd McFarlane, from his run on Amazing Spider-Man through his time on the creator-driven title. Using these, we're going to do an in-depth analysis of McFarlane's art on the web spinner, looking at how it evolves over time, and then determining how the Maximum figure stacks up in 5 crucial categories. This thing has not been very easy to get your hands on. I pre-ordered mine the second it went online on Hasbro Pulse, and it sold out within hours. I actually got to hold it in my hands at New York Toy Fair in February, but it was still going to be months before the thing shipped out. Then my buddy Toy Shiz actually posted that they were available at GameStop, so I immediately went online and placed an in-store pickup order and raced over to my local store. When I got there, they didn't actually have one, and I probably wasn't my personal best when dealing with the poor teenage girl who was working behind the counter. I was trying to get her to make sure that she processed her refund because I haven't seen this mentioned anywhere, but this thing's kind of expensive. So once I found out that I was going to get my money back, I left disgruntled and figured I was just going to have to wait for my Pulse order to show up. But then it actually popped up on the Best Buy website, and that's where I got this one from. I still haven't gotten my Pulse order, but at least I've got this thing in hand. Hey, look what showed up while I was editing this video. A solid case of Maximum Spider-Man figures from Hasbro Pulse. Let's see if we can open this thing up. Yeah, there they are. 4 case fresh figures. And I don't need them all. So why don't we give 3 of these away? All you got to do is give the video a like, leave me a comment, and in a couple of weeks, I'm going to randomly select 3 people to get brand new case fresh copies of Maximum Spider-Man. But let's get back to the art. It's natural for an artist's style to change over time, and this was readily apparent during McFarlane's run on Spider-Man. From different inkers to exaggerated posing, if only there were 3D examples of this. Lucky for us, there are. Todd McFarlane himself has provided us with the template for his evolving art style with his Marvel Posed Figures line. His early art is best represented by this figure, bringing the cover to issue 301 to life. But his art rapidly advanced, as seen with this action shot from inside issue 302. And then the final, full expression of his Spider-Man style from the cover of issue 6 of the adjective-less Spider-Man title. The figure representing the cover of 301 does a great job of illustrating McFarlane's early work on Spider-Man. You do have the unbelievably contorted anatomy, one that I'm really surprised that they were actually able to get into 3-dimensional posing. You've got the spaghetti webbing and the things that we've come to know about McFarlane, particularly the huge eyes. But as we look at these eyes, you can see that they're a little bit softer. The edges are softer. The point up at the top is not quite as harsh. And the web lines are pretty spaced out, not unfamiliar to people who are fans of Romita Sr.'s art. Even particularly across the chest, you can see that the web lines are spaced out. The center logo is the classic McFarlane look, and the back logo is a pretty traditional one. But the musculature is much kind of larger. He's beefier in this format than what we're going to see later. And we'll see that change almost immediately. This piece of art is from just 1 issue later, and you can already begin to see some of the differences. Now, again, you have the incredible contortion, the blatant disregard for normal anatomy, and some really great spaghetti webbing here. The eyes are starting to take a little bit more of a shape. Now you're starting to see that triangle up at the top and a little bit more sharpness here at the corner. The web lines are still pretty spaced out, and the logo on the chest is prominent, but not overdone. The musculature is beginning to get thinner, and these lines are starting to demonstrate that. They're not nearly as kind of bulbous and round as what we saw on the previous figure. But this is not the full look for McFarlane. No, we've got to go one more step to really see that. Now we have come from the image that was taken off of issue 6 of the adjectiveless Spider Man title, and you're getting the full McFarlane treatment here again. Look at this contorting pretzeling of the body where the leg is literally overlapping with the arm. Gone are those bulbous muscles, much more sinewy and thin. Even the decorations on the legs and up here across the chest show so much more detail in the muscles. The eyes have reached their final form. Now you have a sharp point up here at the corner and very prominent hooks right above the nose. And if you look closely, you can see just how tight these web lines are. So much tighter than what we saw on the one from issue 301. The logo on the chest is huge. It's almost as big as like Superman's logo, and the same can be said for the back. This is the final form of McFarlane's art on The Amazing Spider Man. Now that we have an understanding of Todd McFarlane's unique take on the web slinger, let's look at how each of those individual components comes together and just how accurately the Maximum Spider-Man captures that look, beginning with the chest logo. Steve Ditko's art from Amazing Fantasy 15, Spidey's first appearance, showed a round, medium-sized spider with a distinct head and all 8 arms folded downward. Towards the end of his run, the logo had elongated, with a clear midsection, and with the downward arms extending above the lower body. John Romita Sr. essentially codified this as the definitive look for the chess logo. Even Ron Frenz, the main Spidey artist before McFarlane, was still drawing the logo in the classic style in issue 259. But by issue 276, there had been a subtle but important change in how Frenz placed Spidey's arms. Now, the logo had 4 arms pointed up and 4 arms pointed down. It created more symmetry and balance, and clearly influenced the direction McFarlane took the logo. As many of you know, Spidey was wearing a cloth version of the black suit when McFarlane first took over art chores on the title, and as you can see, he came out swinging. But with the first battle against Venom and the symbiote, MJ was so shaken she couldn't stand to see Pete in that costume, so she brought out the old red and blues. And even in this first image, you can see McFarlane's take on that logo. By the next issue, Todd's style was fully formed, a larger logo with a distinct head and body sections and the legs both up and down, but now with tapered thickening of each leg. I did find this one example with little fangs coming off the head, but that didn't last. When McFarlane took over full creative duties, writing, penciling, and inking the adjectiveless Spider Man title, the chest logo had gone from being an accessory to a full on focus, retaining his original design, but now occupying a much larger portion of the chest. McFarlane had taken an aspect of Spidey's costume that had become almost an afterthought and made it a highlight. We've seen this evolution of the chess logo in action figures as well. Here is Hasbro's recent Amazing Fantasy 15, and you can see the very Ditko logo with the large body, the circular head, and all 8 of the arms facing downward. Now, this logo was arguably done even better by Toy Biz in their version in the Marvel Legends line, where you actually have sculpted in looks. But you can see they're obviously very similar and very, very Ditko in origin. Now, John Romita Sr. then took over the title, and in many ways, he de emphasized that chess logo. You can barely even see it here. It's much, much smaller. It became more of an accessory than it was really a highlight of Spidey's costume. And the artists that followed him, whether they be Gil Kane or Ross Andrew, all the way up to John Romita Jr. and Ron Frenz, all kind of took from this and had a smaller, kind of de-emphasized logo. But that clearly changed with Todd McFarlane, who brought this classic front logo to the fore. Again, you've got 4 arms up, 4 arms down, and that they're a very specific angle with those enlarged, rounded tips at the end. So the arms actually begin thinner, closer to the body, and then get thicker towards the ends. You have a clear head and body section, and it looks really good, and it really does create almost like that chest emblem that you would see on Batman or Superman, and it gives Spider-Man his own definitive look for this. As far as the chest logo goes, this is about as perfect a representation of McFarlane's art as you're ever gonna see. It's the right size, it's exactly the right shape, and so for this, I'm gonna give this 5 stars. This is an absolute perfect representation of the front chest logo. Moving to the back logo, Ditko's original design was famously discolored blue in Amazing Fantasy 15, which has only truly been accurately represented on the Marvel Legends Retro series. Although the Toy Biz Marvel Legends AF-15 did get the shape correct with the little head bump. Ditko quickly pivoted to the round spider with the four stubby legs look, but as time went on, the body of the spider became thinner and thinner, and the legs longer and more prominent in his design. Again, John Romita Sr. came in and standardized the look, and this became the default for decades. Ron Frenz brought back a little of the Ditko flair before Todd took over, but very few artists strayed from the traditional look. A notable exception was Alex Ross, whose unique take on the wall crawler included reflective lenses and a complete reimagining of the back logo. This look would be immortalized in plastic by Toy Biz in the Spider Man Classics line. Interestingly, as much as McFarlane subtly tweaked Spidey's uniform, he kept the back logo really traditional. Sure, for a short period of time it was shorter with stubbier legs, but for the most part, even at the end of his run, the back Spider logo was incredibly close to Romita Sr.'s classic design. So now we're looking at the back logo on the Maximum Spider-Man figure, and as you can see, it's incredibly traditional. You've got a nice rounded spider body with the 8 arms extending. It really is almost too generic. I mean, it certainly fits with what McFarlane drew at the time. He drew the back logo a couple of different ways. Sometimes there were thicker legs, sometimes they were thinner like this, but certainly this is an adequate representation. I don't know that I really love the decision to go with painting that upper arm all the way out on the back of the butterfly shoulders. It does give you the ability to get his shoulders crunched much more forward, but it's incredibly awkward looking back here. I think simply leaving those off would have been just fine. It's not like the arms are really missing a lot from that. Truthfully, if we go back and we look at the back of the retro carded Spider-Man, the one that I have always considered to be the definitive John Romita Sr. Spider-Man, it's maybe a little bit more accurate to McFarlane's because the legs have that thicker kind of 90-degree angle. Now, because of the articulation of this figure, this is perhaps a little bit smaller than what we're seeing over here. But for this, because of the fact that Todd didn't really exert a lot of specific influence on the design of this, and so a generic logo actually looks really good, we're going to give this 4 stars out of 5. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the intersection of comic art and action figures, give the video a like and subscribe to Carbon Scoring because we're bringing you goodies like this every single week. Oh, and hey, before you make fun of my face, check out some of this original art and realize it may not be as far off as you thought it was. Next, we're going to dig into the web pattern on the red portions of Spider Man's costume, something that can literally change from panel to panel by the same artist. Again, Ditko's style changed over the 3+ years he was drawing the wall crawler, initially starting with a tighter web pattern with way more lines, before settling into a spaced out look that remained essentially unchanged for 20 years. Until Todd McFarlane. McFarlane's web lines were tighter from the very beginning, especially when he was inking his own pencils. You can see here with Joseph Rubinstein on inks that the lines are more traditional. But once Todd had full creative control, all bets were off. The lines were smaller, finer, and he used the shape and the contour of the webs to define Spidey's lanky, athletic musculature. No artist, before or since, has utilized Spider Man's web pattern in this way. Let's come back to those two McFarlane statues that we looked at earlier, because while both are incredibly accurate, they do a great job of showing just how McFarlane's web pattern changed during his run on Spider Man. With the earlier one, you do have a little bit more spacing, particularly around the head and mouth area, and again across the chest. Whereas in the later versions, these webs are tight. They are tight all the way around, and look at just how grouped together they are across the abdomen. Now, that has multiple points. One, it does create a great deal more detail, which goes along with the much more detailed musculature that he was drawing at the time. But it also allows him, by using the curves and the contours of these webs, to actually create more intricate patterns in the web line and draw out the muscles even more. You can see how the web lines are spaced out as they're stretched across his shoulder, but then they're tightened up again across the tricep area. Same thing here. They really get bunched as the abdomen crunches down together. So it's something that McFarlane did arguably better than anybody else, and we're going to see it done really well on the Maximum Spider Man figure. Again, comparing a more recent Hasbro Spider Man figure with the new Maximum Spider Man figure, the difference in this web pattern is incredibly obvious. As you can see with Maximum, there is a tight pattern along his face, much more reminiscent of McFarlane's later art. It does expand a little as it spreads out across the back, but here in the front, very tight. The same can be said across his upper torso, much tighter lines that then space nicely as you go down the arms and then tighten up again at the wrist and the hands. Going across the triceps, the biceps, and the deltoid, much more space compared to right here up at the shoulder. It's a nice look. It's a subtle thing, but it really does help define the features of the figure. Again, there's a lot through the abdomen, and as you get it crunched down, it really kind of looks as though it comes together. I like the fact that they are continuing that this is the equal level of tightness from the forearms down to the boot cuts. Really good. So when you compare this to the later McFarlane art, I think that the web lines, they're absolutely perfect. So we're going to go 5 out of 5 stars for the web lines on Maximum Spider-Man. Now let's talk about Spider-Man's frame. You might be able to pick up on a pattern by now. Ditko starts one way and then shifts to another. Romita codifies the look, and then McFarlane puts his own unique twist on it. So Ditko starts with an incredibly scrawny teenage Peter, but fairly quickly morphs into a much more powerful, compact figure for the wall crawler. Romita Sr., with his background in romance comics, gave Spidey more classically heroic proportions. McFarlane's contorted, twisting poses necessitated a leaner, more acrobatic frame. His early art was probably closer to Ditko's, more of a muscular spark plug of a figure, but like the master, he wasn't afraid to evolve his style to improve his storytelling. His influence would be felt for generations, as subsequent artists from Eric Larson to Mark Bagley to Humberto Ramos to Marcos Martin all adopted their own versions of a life, limber, longer silhouette. As we have pointed out, McFarlane took Spider Man's physique to some real extremes. Probably some of the most extreme changes to his physique that we saw since the days of Steve Ditko. And I think the title was all the better for it. He took a character that had really become kind of bland. Spider Man was nowhere near Marvel's best selling book when Todd took over as the art chores on the title, and it quickly rocketed to the top, surpassing even the X-Men in monthly sales. So much so that they published the book twice a month during the summertime, which led to some not quite as quality of books. Todd had to get some inking help with that. But then when he took over the adjectiveless Spider-Man title, where he was his own boss, he was writing the stories, he was drawing, he was inking, that was when we saw the full expression of what he felt like Spider-Man's body should look like. And it was long, it was lean, it was muscular with details in the muscular where you could see all of the different striations of the different muscles across the abdomen, across the back, through the arms. It was an incredibly detailed and time taking effort to draw the figure the way that he did. And I think that this figure absolutely captures that look. It captures that lean, lithe, acrobatic Spider-Man that McFarlane drew, a very different Spider-Man than what we had seen before. Now, one of the most common comparisons that I hear about this figure is how does it stack up with the Mafex figure? Because truly, this Mafex figure is one of the best Spider-Mans that we've ever gotten. Now, just to kind of point it out, this is a custom Ryan Otley head sculpt as well as custom hands, both of those from Ferrule store, and I'll put a link in the description for that. You can see that the figures are different in their proportions. Mafex is still lean, but he's a little bit shorter, not nearly as long and as spidery as the Maximum Spider-Man. He also has a little bit more of kind of the bulbous muscles, where the Maximum are much more strung out and longer. I think that this is arguably a better overall over the span of Generation Spider-Man. I think that's why so many of us use it for custom heads, because it does apply to different looks for the web spinner. It does have such smooth articulation. And I mean, it's a great figure. Now, granted, it costs twice as much as this one, but in general, it probably speaks to more eras of Spider Man. But if we're talking about the specific era of Todd McFarlane on the web spinner, the body of this figure absolutely captures it perfectly. So, again, as far as the body frame goes, we're going to go 5 out of 5 stars. But I have obviously saved the most important feature of Spider Man's costume for last: the eyes. No other part of Spidey's look has been as varied, stylized, or individualized as the web spinner's unique lenses. While subtle differences existed from the beginning, once Todd McFarlane blew up the size of the eyepieces, it seemed like every artist that followed decided that the eyes would be their signature, that thing that would distinguish their Spider Man from everyone else's. This is bar none the most important part of a Spider-Man figure for me, and unfortunately, it's also my biggest disappointment with the Maximum Spider-Man figure. These are definitely meant to be McFarlane eyes, particularly in profile. You can definitely see the nose, the curve of the mouth, and the chin. That looks exactly like McFarlane. But when you look at it dead on from the front, the spacing above the web slinger's nose is just, it's a little bit too broad. It makes his eyes look like they're more set on the side of his costume and not looking forward. And part of that is the lack of the little white curl that comes up just above the nose. You know, we saw this repeatedly on the McFarlane statue. You can see there's that little white curve, and look at how much closer set the eyes are compared to the one on the Maximum Spider-Man. It's just really disappointing, and it's really off-putting to me to look at it. But that's not my only problem with the eyes. The black highlights around the edges, to me, are too thin. They look okay in direct profile, but at any other angle, they're just far too thin, particularly this angle here, which is incredibly flat on this figure, where it needs to have a little bit more of a curve. I'd also like to see a little bit more prominence to the point right up there. I mean, you know, we can look at the example here and see how this curvature really stands out, whereas here it's much more flat. And it's a subtle difference, but that added black around the edge does make a huge difference in this. These almost look more like Todd Lytle eyes more so than they do Todd McFarlane. Now, I thought when I saw the initial promo images that this was not going to be a big deal, because I saw this alternate head. Now, look at this. This is almost perfect. Much more of a curve down leading away from the nose. Far, far thicker black around. And it's not super prominent, but you can definitely see the point there. The problem was it's asymmetrical. If we had just gotten these two eyes on both sides, particularly if they came together above the bridge of the nose a little bit better, then I would give this the full 5 stars. But unfortunately, when we're talking about this as the main head sculpt and only half of what we really needed with the alternate head sculpt, this is where this figure really gets knocked down in my view. I'm only giving this 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I can make an argument this isn't even the most McFarlane figure in all of Marvel Legends history. I could say that that could go to this figure from Toy Biz's Spider-Man Classics line. So this was packaged in, I want to say 2003 or 2004 in the Spider-Man Classics subset line. And it has a lot of the features that we're looking for in a very McFarlane figure. Now, that front chest logo is pretty close, but it doesn't have the longer tips to the legs. So not quite as good there. I would say that this back is pretty strong, though. That's a very, very McFarlane looking back. The web pattern is etched in, so it's not quite as tight as what we saw on the Maximum Spider Man, but it's certainly tighter than what you would see with your typical Spider Man figure. And I know everybody loves carved in, sculpted in web lines, but it does lead to some muddy paint applications because it's just really hard to get that in there without getting everything else the way that it ought to be. Now, from a body frame standpoint, this one is even more McFarlane. It's so long. It is so stretched out. The legs are so thin yet tautly muscular. The ball hips are a total distraction. There's no doubt. Although I actually think these butterflies work really well because you're able to get them all the way across without any odd gaping back here. And the way that they did it across the top of that red portion of Spidey's costume works really well. He has these long, tapering, each individually articulated Toy Biz fingers. So you don't need extra hands when he can make a fist or thwippers with, his articulated fingers. But where I think this one is better, the eyes are better. It's a thicker black. It's a better point. They come together closer in the middle. This one has a little bit of a sloppy paint app, but I've got a couple of these. I have one on display in my main Spider-Man display, and it's really good. Now, it shows its age. This figure is over 20 years old at this point. So it doesn't really hold a candle to the modern fluidity of movement, the better articulation, the drop down hips. But in some ways, it really represents McFarlane's style even better. All right, my spider senses are tingling. I know you guys are ready to jump all over these comments. Do you feel like I got it right? Do you think that my study of Todd McFarlane's art has led to a realistic approach and look at how this figure is constructed and how well it represents that singular time in Spider-Man's history? Or am I way off base and a complete idiot and I've got this totally wrong? Or do you just want to get in the comments and complain about the fact that this thing costs $50? I don't care. Let me know what you think. I've given you my opinions. I've tried to validate and support why I feel the way that I feel. You guys tell me what you think. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.